Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Hot Routes, Matthew Coller and Manny Hill here. Over here to my right is a television with a National Football League game on. And I told you, Manny, that I need you to make sure you set up your house so you can keep your eye on this game, Chiefs and Ravens, as we talk here. And of course, we're going to talk a lot of Minnesota Vikings. We'll get into a little bit of week one as well. A lot to talk about as we march toward finally the Minnesota Vikings hitting the field. But already we've seen Lamar Jackson make some nice throws marching down the field. And it's not a National Football League season, Manny, until you and I have been snarky about Lamar Jackson throwing the football. So here we are, week one. How you feeling, man?
Yeah, I'm just in utter shock that Lamar Jackson is throwing the football. I mean, running backs throw the football. What is this new revolution? No, I mean, we both know, and many people know, that he's been an outstanding thrower of the football, even going all the way back to his days in Louisville, which is why he won a damn Heisman Trophy. He's fantastic, and he's off to a great start this season. It's awesome to see.
Well, he's only won 2 MVPs since switching to wide receiver, as Bill Polian suggested during the draft time. This game, though, couldn't have started off with a better matchup. And then who knows what's going to happen tomorrow night in Brazil with the Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. That seems like kind of a nightmare situation. And I saw something about the travel. Oh, wow. We've got a track meet already with Xavier Worthy scoring a touchdown right off the bat. By the way, real quick on Xavier Worthy, the Buffalo Bills made a trade that allowed Kansas City to pick Xavier Worthy, and I will just never understand it. They made a trade with Kansas City that allowed them to get Mahomes, and then did the same thing with Worthy, the fastest guy. I mean, they just gave him Tyreek Hill 2.0, and already he's got a touchdown on the board. So great job, Bills, helping your biggest competitor. Oh, they helped the Texans as well by giving them Stephon Diggs. I don't really understand what they're doing when it comes to that, but we'll keep an eye on this game, of course, and have a good time watching it. But I want to talk to you, Manny, about a question that was posed to one Justin Jefferson today. Justin Jefferson was asked about the 2,000 yard mark and whether his eyes are on trying to clear it. And I thought Justin Jefferson would say, okay, bro, why don't I just go to the Meadowlands, catch a few balls, and then we'll figure out where I go from there. But he actually did say, hey, I've always kind of had 2,000 on my mind, and that would be the NFL record, and that would be pretty cool. Do you think that Justin Jefferson has to readjust his expectations for his own statistics for this year based on whomst is playing quarterback for him? Or do you think that he'll still do the same stuff statistically as he has done before and end up pressing for records and everything else? How do you think that this is going to go between him and Sam Darnold?
It's interesting because, I think on paper and we've talked for multiple years now about how Justin Jefferson, it's basically throw him the football, right? I mean, it's really seemed like Kevin O'Connell has figured out that that's the formula to make this offense tick, is to just throw Justin Jefferson the damn football as often as possible. But I think because of the Sam Darnold factor in all of this, I think the expectations from a number standpoint might need to be tapered just a little bit, because I think, let's be honest, the Vikings in the offseason, at least for now, downgraded at quarterback. I think that's fair to say. I mean, Kirk Cousins, I think, is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And also, I think when you factor in, what they've done in the running back room now, adding Aaron Jones into the mix, we could see them start to run the ball a little bit more and be more effective in the running game, which I think would just reduce some of the opportunities for Justin Jefferson or anybody in the passing game, really, to get as many targets, because if they're running the ball with success, I would imagine that they're going to, do that a little bit more. So I look at it as far as expectations, I don't even really think about what the numbers are going to be. My expectations are, though, for Justin Jefferson to be him, be the guy that we've talked about as the best guy in the world at his craft, at what he does in his position, and to really kind of help elevate Sam Darnold into having a really good, productive season. Is he going to catch 2,000 yards worth of footballs? I have a hard time believing that, because we've seen guys come close. Calvin Johnson came close many years ago. And so Cooper Kupp, I think, came kind of close a couple of years ago with the Rams, but I think that's a really hard number to get to. Now, if there's somebody that could do it, I think it's Justin Jefferson. But I think just when you factor in what this offense might look like with, in theory, the improved running game, and with Sam Darnold, maybe being a little bit of a downgrade at the quarterback position, I think it would be hard to see him getting to the 2,000-yard mark this year.
Would love everybody watching feedback on this conversation, and also any questions that you have going into week one. What is remaining on your mind about this game and about what is going to befall us into the future of the Minnesota Vikings 2024 season? Jump in there, ask your questions. We had a great time answering them on Monday night. I want to make that much more of the show this year than it was for those OGs who listened to us last year. We didn't do as much chat, and I want to do a lot more of it. Jordan Addison, by the way, said today, we had a chance to talk to him, said that he is expecting to play 100%. He said that he's had this injury before. He knew as soon as it happened that what the timeline would be and that he would be back in week one. And it was kind of funny because he's like, well, I think you guys made a little too much of this injury. And I'm like, well, you did miss several weeks of practice and you're still limited, but okay, fair enough. He says he's good to go and will play on Sunday. And I tend to believe him based on the fact that he has been out there for practice, even if it is on a limited basis. I'm going to give you a number that an NFL wide receiver had last year, and you tell me if this is a realistic situation for Justin Jefferson numbers wise. Okay. This wide receiver caught 79 passes for 1,255 yards and 13 touchdowns last season. Would that be, now 13 touchdowns would be a lot for Jefferson since everybody always defends him so much in the red zone, but let's just say 79 catches, 136 targets for 1,255 yards. Would that be a good season for you for Jefferson? Is that a little low for Justin Jefferson and maybe disappointing, or how would you feel about that? And then I'll tell you who it is.
I think it would be a little bit of a disappointment. Now, I mean, obviously if he's healthy for the entire 17 games, that is, I think that would be a little bit of a disappointment. I think he had, I know he got to 1,000 yards last year. I think he had 68, finished with 68 catches, something like that. And that was in basically 9-10 games that he ended up playing in, which is, if you average that out, he certainly would have gotten over 100 and, 1,600 yards, something like that. But I think if he plays all 17 games and those are his final numbers, the touchdown numbers would be pretty high, but I still kind of feel like the catch and yardage numbers would be a little bit low, even for him.
Okay. That was Mike Evans last year with Baker Mayfield. And with Tampa Bay and Dave Canales, they took a running approach. Even though they were bad at it, they still ran 272 times. I didn't even realize this till I looked at it with Rachaad White. I did not remember anyone in the NFL having 272 carries in the year 2023, but that happened. They really rode him hard. In fact, the next best guy in terms of carries for running backs only had 49. I don't think it's going to go that way with Aaron Jones, but they ran the ball a lot, over 400 times total, and only threw 568 passes to get Baker Mayfield just over the edge of 4,000 yards with a 94 quarterback rating, 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. When we make the comparisons to Baker Mayfield, his stats were very realistic for what Sam Darnold's could be in a good case or best case scenario. And if Justin Jefferson ended up with over 1,000 yards I think that would be, like you said, a little on the low side from what we've come to expect for him, only about 1,200 yards, but he averaged 16 yards a catch. And the reason that I thought this was a perfect comparison is there might just be a little bit more deep down the sideline, just go, and I'm going to huck it up to you and see if you can go catch it for Justin Jefferson from Sam Darnold. I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up being the case a little bit more rather than intermediate, short, intermediate, like it was with Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins. I do think that if you alter this offense in the correct way, that even if the numbers are tweaked a little bit and are not the same, and by the way, if Addison ends up with Chris Godwin's numbers, 83 catches for 1,000 yards at 12 receptions a pop, I mean, that's a more than ideal season for Jordan Addison. But you can kind of see the comparison because they had really no number 3 wide receiver. Their number 3 wide receiver had 39 catches. They leaned on their tight ends a bit. They leaned on their running backs a bit and just threw the ball over and over to wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. And if it's the good case scenario, if you go 9-8, your offense is somewhere in the middle of the league. You're running the football a little bit more than Kevin O'Connell feels comfortable with and pushing it downfield to Justin Jefferson. I think he would be disappointed in numbers like that because he's used to having historic numbers. At the same time, if you are getting 16 yards a catch out of him, even if he's not getting as many targets, I think that that's helping you win if you're still getting those explosive plays.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's almost kind of like Randy Moss's rookie year in 98 was absolutely historic, but it's kind of the same thing. Like Randy he scored, I think he had 17 touchdowns as a rookie. I think he only had 69 catches, maybe 1,400 yards. But to your point, every catch that he made, because there were so many deep passes, and even some of the short passes, like the play in Dallas where he caught the sort of a sideline pass from Cunningham and then sprinted down the sideline for like an 80-yard touchdown. There were so many of those type of plays for Randy Moss, which, you kind of look and say, okay, well, he only caught 69 passes. It could be a similar situation with Justin Jefferson. And also, I think something I didn't really think about too is you have Aaron Jones now, and he's a guy that you can kind of throw the ball to out of the backfield as well. So I wonder if we'll kind of see a little bit more of that, because we didn't, the first 2 years under Kevin O'Connell, we didn't really see a lot of that. Certainly last year, we didn't see them throwing the ball to running backs a whole lot. Maybe a little bit more in 2022 with Dalvin Cook, but Aaron Jones is a guy that we saw in Green Bay. You can throw the ball to him and get him out in space, and he can make some plays and make some things happen. So I think if Justin Jefferson can get to that 16 yards a catch type of threshold, and have more explosive plays, then you're probably right. It probably will, it'll look a little different, but it will still be every bit as productive.
Yeah. And I think with Aaron Jones, he is kind of what everyone always wanted Dalvin Cook to be. It felt like a classic offseason story every year. Well, is Dalvin going to be more involved in the passing game? And he just never was. I don't think he would catch a pass downfield every once in a while, but it seemed like they never had confidence of putting him in any type of downfield role. In 2019, he did a lot of screen stuff, but then they got worse at the screen stuff as it went along. 2022 was terrible with the screen game, and he just never really came to fruition as that receiving back, which I think Aaron Jones can. And I also think Ty Chandler could catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So if that ends up being your distribution, if it's 79 to Jefferson and a lot of explosives and 80 to Addison and a lot of underneath, and you've got 50 or 60 to the tight ends, Hockenson will probably come back middle of the season, and then 60 more to Aaron Jones. Like, that's a good distribution for Sam Darnold, even though it doesn't result in Justin Jefferson with enormous numbers. I still think he's going to get the ball plenty. I just wonder if it's in a bit of a different form than it has been before from him. And you're going to have to find ways to get him the ball on some short stuff. But when I went back and looked at how Sam Darnold threw the ball to DJ Moore, it was a lot of shots down the field and a lot of, if he got in trouble, he would just wing it in the general direction of DJ Moore, which can work for you with Justin Jefferson. So let's get into some of these questions here. And then we've got some other things to talk about with Vikings Giants. I want your all-time favorite New York Giants list. I'm very curious to hear who your favorite Giants of all time were. And we'll take anything else you guys got. So I Shot You 99 says, what would be your I'm surprised this happened and surprised this didn't happen for the team this year? That's a good question. What do you got for that, Manny?
I'm surprised this happened. I think something that would probably surprise me is I think a big one is if they just like win the division. I think that would be that would be a major surprise. But I also think like if they get into the playoffs and like as a wild card and like win a game, I think that would kind of surprise me. I think they've got an outside chance of, certainly I think they have a chance to be in the conversation late in the season for a playoff spot and an outside chance of getting in. But if they get in at like 9-8, 10-7, and then go on the road against a division winner and win, that would kind of shock me. I think, just because it's still like it's still Sam Darnold, right? And we're still like not really 100% sold on him being a guy that can just like be fantastic and lead a top flight offense. We just haven't really seen him do that yet. But I think there's a chance that you can get a little bit more out of him, certainly than previous teams have, and they can kind of be in the mix. But they make the playoffs and win a game, that would really surprise me. The surprise that this didn't happen is kind of hard because we have some expectations for this team, but I'm still like, I'm not sure exactly what to expect from this team, exactly what this team is going to look like. So it's a good question. It's a great question, but because there are still kind of a few unknowns, I guess one I could go with is if this defense is just like bad.
Yeah.
So like if this defense is like not good, that would surprise me. I think I think that there's enough on this defense to be, to flirt with a top 10 spot and to give this team a chance to really win some games where the offense might struggle occasionally. If this defense ends up like in the bottom third of the league, that would really surprise me.
I am going to go with, I would be surprised if, you could kind of use this either way. If it didn't happen, if they didn't clear 6 wins, if they didn't get to 7, 8, or 9 wins, I would be surprised if that happened or didn't happen, whichever phrasing you would prefer for that. I guess I was thinking this from a global and an individual standpoint. I would be surprised if Blake Brandel was a Pro Bowler or something. Like, hey, there's got to be, if you're going to go somewhere, you need someone to really surprise you. And I think about who on the roster that could be. If Stephon Gilmore is amazing and leads the league in interceptions, I would be surprised that happened. Maybe level of surprise wouldn't be completely blown away because of his talent, but for someone who's 34 years old coming in, if he suddenly was the one that propelled the defense to a totally different level, but you could go deep surprise as in total shock. Hey, if Harrison Phillips got 9 sacks, then I would be very surprised if a run stuffer ended up getting a ton of sacks. So I guess we could do this on a sliding scale, but if we're thinking about just the result of the season, it would surprise me if they were, as a team, if they were catastrophically bad. And you can always have a quarterback injury. You can always end up playing Brett Rippon by week 4 or something. That would not be ideal if that ended up happening. That can always happen in the NFL. So you can't count it out. Also, I think just in general, as far as this franchise goes, saying what would surprise you at this point, for even as long as I've been here, for as long as you've lived here, nothing. I mean, how can I be surprised after 2016, my first year here, they go 5-0 and then miss the playoffs. And then the following season, they reached the NFC Championship after I thought, no way are they even making the playoffs as soon as Case Keenum went in, and they end up with the Minneapolis Miracle. I mean, we've just seen so many things happen that I don't think there's any way you can be terribly surprised by a lot of results. But I think with Darnold, it kind of is the same take as the entire team. I would be surprised if it's any extreme for him. If it's extremely good, it's surprising. Or if it's worse than it's been before, or even if it's as bad as it's been before, that would also surprise me based on what I've seen in camp. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I kind of echo the same thing. Like, I can't imagine with the setup that this team is going to have offensively. I just would be really shocked to see like Jets Sam Darnold. That would be almost completely impossible with this setup. But anyway.
How about this? Would you be surprised if at the end of the season, if it didn't happen, an extension for Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah of serious years into the future? So not a 1-year extension or something like that. Would it be surprising to you if they did not end up saying, we're going into the future with these two guys?
So you're saying like if Darnold plays poorly and they give KOC and Kwesi an extension?
I just mean in general, based on the results we think are going to happen, would it surprise you if they got to the end of the year and the ownership said, we're not going to extend them right now, or we're giving them a courtesy 1-year extension so they're not lame ducks? If there was a situation where we could get to the end of the year and the ownership doubted where this thing was going enough to the point to not want to extend them long-term, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that would surprise me, because I think it, unless this becomes like a 4-13, 3-14 type of situation where because I think at that point, even you and I would have some question marks about what's going on. But if this is even if this is like a 7-10 type of thing, I just don't think it would be a very good idea to not give these two guys, certainly KOC, an extension, because I just think there's a real plan in place here, and I think you really need to give these guys an opportunity to see this out. Let's see this JJ McCarthy thing play out. Give them 2 or 3 years to kind of see his growth and development. I mean, if you go 7-10 and you don't give these guys an extension and you're going into 2025 with a lot of question marks, that doesn't do anybody any good. It certainly doesn't do KOC and Kwesi any good. It doesn't really do the young quarterback any good, because now there's uncertainty about, like, okay, well, if you move on and get another coach, is that coach going to want JJ McCarthy, or is he going to want to go into the draft again and get his own guy? So I would be kind of surprised by that. And honestly, I'd be kind of disappointed if they don't go that route of giving these guys some extensions. Again, I think you got to show it this year. Show something this year. Don't let this year be a complete disaster. But I think you got to give this whole operation, this front office, this process a chance to fully play out.
Questions, comments, keep throwing them in there. We will answer them through the night. Okay. JP says, Jalen Naylor once again hurt. Opportunity for Tristan Jackson. I believe Powell will be more of a gadget player this year. Either way, I hope they run the ball more often. Well, we'll see if Naylor plays. He's only limited in practice, and he was out there jogging around. He shouldn't tweak an ankle and then we go, okay, he's made of glass, doesn't want to play, it's over, season over for Jalen Naylor. I think he'll be able to get out there this weekend and play, or at least even if he isn't 100%, he'll be able to mix in. That's at least what it looks like right now. That could change by game day, but we don't have to in his first time on the injury report. Lots of guys will show up on the injury report throughout an NFL season, declare that his career is now over and he can't stay on the field just because of a limited tag on the injury report on a Thursday, and maybe even Friday he'll be off. We'll see about that. But I think with these backup receivers, Manny, I'm just not putting big numbers on anybody. I'm not putting big numbers on Naylor, Jackson, Powell, Sherfield. I think that Trent Sherfield's going to play quite a bit because he has experience and brings some good blocking to them. I just feel like we're going to get a lot of 2 tight ends, and we're going to get a lot of throws toward Jefferson and toward Addison, and the other guys will mix in. But if somebody ends up with more than 35 catches, that's another receiver, talk about being surprised, then I would be surprised. I think Naylor can hit a few shots down the field. I think Sherfield could be a guy underneath, and the same with Powell. But there's nobody here that I look at, even Tristan Jackson, and go, yeah, well, the guy had a great training camp, so now he's suddenly going to come in and be Jake Reed. That's just not the situation. And I don't feel like, as of this moment, there is a KJ Osborne even here that they can trust consistently with the wide receiver 3. It's going to be a lot of 1-2, throw to the running back, underneath to Johnny Mundt, underneath to Josh Oliver, underneath to Hockenson when he comes back, and then trying not to throw 50 passes a game. The thing with Kirk Cousins and KOC together was, if you're a weapon of theirs, you're going to get the football because there's a lot of football to go around. You know that whole thing when a team has a lot of weapons and someone goes, man, it's too bad there's only one football. It's Like, yeah, well, in KOC's offense with Kirk, everybody got the football a lot. And I just don't know that it's going to be exactly that way with this team.
I'm kind of envisioning, as you were talking about that, I was kind of envisioning kind of what Jarius Wright was in 2017. You know, I mean, a lot of the passes in 2017 went to Kyle Rudolph, they went to Diggs and Thielen. And Jarius Wright was kind of like the third receiver, but I think he only had like maybe 20 catches that year. I mean, they didn't, he had some big catches, in the miracle game. He had a couple nice catches in that game. But yeah, for Naylor, Jackson, those guys, I'm just not really expecting a lot of production from them. If we get anything from them, I think it might top out at, like you said, probably 35, maybe 40 catches. If Jefferson or Addison maybe miss a game or two, then, they would kind of slide into that number 2 spot and maybe get a few more looks. But I can't imagine they would be super productive. But I think the fact that we've kind of seen them do a little bit in preseason, certainly with Tristan Jackson, it kind of lets you know, like, okay, they at least have somebody competent that can step in if, Jefferson or Addison have to miss a game or two.
I just feel like that Tampa Bay example is exactly what you can expect for this. Is number 1 and number 2 with quarterbacks in this range. That is generally how it tends to work. But even as you mentioned, when it was Diggs Thielen, that's how it was going all the time. It was thrown to wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 1A over and over and over again. And then occasionally to Kyle Rudolph underneath. And that's your passing offense. And if you have your choice of who to throw to, you're going to sneak Naylor in there every once in a while, but you want the ball going to the other 2 guys a lot more often, which leads me to be not that concerned about Jalen Naylor, because I think the guys behind him are all kind of on that very similar level. And just to add on to what you said about Jarius Wright, I think it was 17 receptions, but it was the most talked about 17 receptions because every single one of them was enormous in that season. It was Mr. Third Down, and he would just show up. And that's what really matters, right? Not exactly the volume of Jalen Naylor or Sherfield or Tristan Jackson. It's when they show up. Wade says, question, how much did J.J. McCarthy's injury help the likelihood of KOC and KAM extensions? I don't know how much it did because I can't play it out and see how it would have gone otherwise. If McCarthy had gone in there and looked terrible, then it wouldn't have helped it at all. If he had looked great, then of course, I guess you're eliminating one of those possibilities. If McCarthy had come in and win 10 games, then KOC's your coach for the next 5 years after that, at least. But as far as him getting injured, I don't know that it changes a ton. It might actually hurt him in some ways because this opens the door for not only a season that's bad, but one that doesn't have hope vibes. If you were playing JJ McCarthy and you start off 1-6, and then if you're playing Sam Darnold and you start off 1-6, and then you put in JJ McCarthy, and even if you win 4 games the rest of the way, he's going to look good at times. And you can always go back to that. Hey, I know we only won 5 games or 6 games this year, but did you see the flashes? You got to believe in that. You got to believe in us going forward. Whereas if you win 5 or 6 games with Sam Darnold, by the end of this thing, it's just going to be a nightmare. It's going to be so miserable going to the stadium for every Sunday at that point. And there's not going to be anything to look forward to and go, yeah, but next week, we get to see the rookie quarterback again. I don't know how much all of that plays into a contract extension. I just feel like it's so many bigger factors about how the organization is run in general. And I can understand where the Wilfs would want to see this year play out and just see another sample size season from Kevin O'Connell. But I think we know that the locker room's not going to turn. It's not going to turn into a toxic situation as it was in 2021. The team building has been good so far, I think, to this point in executing their vision. I just am not really sure that injury altered the extension situation. I don't know if you feel differently.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I kind of feel like we said before, if they go 3-14, I think everybody's going to have some questions. You and I will have questions. The Wills will have questions. I think a lot of the fans will be like, yo, what the hell was that? And I think that would be if rather JJ McCarthy was healthy or not. I mean, so I think ultimately what you're just kind of hoping for is that this team just can stay competitive, remain interesting for a majority of the season, even if they come up short of the playoffs. And then I think if that happens, I think it will kind of proceed forward as we kind of expect, which is that KOC and Kwesi will get extensions after the season.
Wade says the offensive line rules on the line of scrimmage will help Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Turner if the tackles can't line up at 45-degree angles. That does seem to be a point of emphasis now for the league, Manny, that they want offensive lines to look like offensive lines. And I watch old games. You watch old games. It is so much different from where the tackles used to be on the line of scrimmage to where now they're playing way back. And it does help edge rushers in the NFL just in general about, coming off the edge, I think. And that's why they started doing it, was to try to get that extra step. The kick return so far has done absolutely nothing. There's been a couple of kneel downs here. It looks to me, and there was a comment earlier, I'm sorry, I scrolled by it, but it looks to me like they are going to have to make it the 35 on the kneel down if they want this play to actually be a play, because it sounds like a lot of teams are just going to kick it in the end zone. Teams are going to kneel down and everyone's going to punt on this play being a big impact thing. Matt Daniels has said that he thinks that it can be, but if they're going to handle it this way, as Baltimore and Kansas City are, because there's so much uncertainty, then maybe we're not going to see the return of all the great kick returners of our life's past, Manny.
Yeah. And the other thing that I applaud the league for trying different things to see if it can, change and maybe, bring some excitement to the kick return. Because like you, I'm kind of an old school person with football. I like kick returners being a factor in games because we've seen so many great ones over the years, and we're about the same age, growing up and seeing, obviously Devin Hester is one of the GOATs, but guys like Dante Hall and some of the other guys, was it Brian Mitchell with the Eagles?
Oh yeah,
and with Washington for a while, was really good. So I kind of miss that, and I want to see that, but it's hard to really know if there's really anything that they can do at this point to kind of bring those days back, because kickers are just blasting this football into the back of the end zone, even with the change rules now.
I think if it doesn't work, the Ravens just ran a very goofy play on fourth down. If it doesn't work like this, just end the kickoff altogether. Just call it a day. Say, we tried, no more kick returns. There's so many of the past, so many here. Percy Harvin, Cordell Patterson, even in the division, the Mel Grays of the world. I mean, just a lot of fun players that carved out niches for themselves. And even Kene Nwangwu for a little bit there, as it was on its way to a complete death. Even he showed some excitement of how good that play can be. But if this is what it's going to look like, just end it. Just start every drive, just start at the 25 and let's not talk about it anymore. And I will be sad, but I just don't want to waste my time. I don't want every kickoff to be all the fans just get up and go get, a soda or go to the bathroom or something during the kickoff. And that's what it's become. And that's what it's been here on opening night so far. Matt says, no offense to KOC because I think he's a good coach, but him running more than 45% of the time would be really surprising. The KOC run the ball challenge. Let's put a mark on it. What would you be impressed by if KOC's development as an offensive play caller? And we have to acknowledge too, when you have one of the worst yards per carry averages in the league. Now, Dave Canales, as I showed you, even though his running back was averaging 3.6, he stuck with it in Tampa Bay. And I think there is something to that. If the defense knows that you will stay with it, you can build stuff off of it. There is a benefit, but I understand why he didn't want to trust Alexander Madison much. But my issue with him was, even when Madison was doing well, he would still go back to the pass over and over again. Is it 40? Should we make it 45%? The KOC run the ball challenge. Can he get over the season plus 45% of running the football?
I think he can, but I think it's going to have to be a situation where the Vikings are getting a lead in games and having a substantial lead in the second half of games to where it's like, all right, yeah, we're going to run the ball here, try to control the clock and get out of here with a win. Otherwise, yeah, it just feels like, as you say, he's just gonna keep pushing that pass button. It's like he's got a PlayStation controller in front of him, and he's just hitting the X button, which is the pass button, just over and over and over again. You get it. I mean, it's a passing league now. He's a quarterback. He's a former quarterback himself. He's an offensive guy. But I think I would like to see this running game be a lot more efficient, because I think, if we really want to see them get the most out of Sam Darnold, I think that's going to be a big part of it, is having a good running game and not have Sam Darnold in situations where he's got to kind of do it all himself, where you've got 3rd and 15, 3rd and 16 type of situations. I think at times you could maybe count on Kirk Cousins a little bit more to come through in situations like that. Certainly not all the time. But I think it would be harder for a guy like Sam Darnold to really come through in situations like that. And I think to avoid those things, you're going to have an efficient running game.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that they must be aware that they have to run the ball successfully in order to have a good offense, just period. You're not going to lean on your quarterback all season long, make the playoffs that way. I don't know that that means that they're going to be a run first type of team, or that they're going to go over even 45%. I would advise it, but also you have to understand, I just think that when it comes to running the football, there's something that requires a deeper understanding of how to coach the offensive line to do this, what type of schemes match up against what types of fronts. And if there isn't a person who is really your expert, and that goes back to the Alex Gibbs thing for those Shanahan teams and the Kubiak and all that. And it's just such a good example that you could go to, because it was here and we saw it and we still see it. Stefanski runs the ball successfully in Cleveland. So if your thing is kind of old school in a way, run and shoot, where, Kevin Gilbride's passing the ball over and over again, which got him whacked on the sideline by, was it Buddy Ryan smacked him on the sideline? That is going way back. You've got to be quite old or an NFL historian to remember that. But the point just being that those old run and shoot teams, that's what they would do. They would just pass and pass and pass. They'd run a delay and then they'd pass some more. I think that is more of KOC. And I will say, overall, in the big picture, when McCarthy arrives, when you're designing your offense of the future, I want that to be their offense. Mahomes, just a breathtaking 3rd and 12 completion, by the way. I want that to be their offense. I want it to lean into the quarterback. I don't want it to be a conservative run first type of thing. I think it's this year where you're taking a little bit of a deviation from what there you go. You saw it from what you normally.
I'm about 15 seconds behind you, but my goodness.
Wow. He's back. Football is officially back when that play happens. Although this year, Manny, we may see a quarterback scramble and make some plays, unlike historically from you and I watching this team in most recent years. But anyway, the 45% challenge will be in place. I just think as far as scoring the most points in the future, his philosophy is right to pass a lot more. And I remember we talked about it. If you're going to have Kirk, lean into him. KOC did. They had a lot of success doing it. So it's not really an overall criticism as much as, well, you need to be better when you do run it. And this year you probably have to do it more than you're comfortable with. Okay. That's a lot of the Vikings run game to talk about. Derek says, question for Manny, the New York Giant with the most rushing touchdowns. I assume this means of all time. I don't know the answer to this. Is it Frank Gifford? I'll find this out.
Oh, that's a great question. First person that came to my mind was Tiki Barber, but I don't think Tiki ran for that many touchdowns, to be totally honest. And Tiki also didn't play very long.
By the way, the all-time leader, these are two different answers, but the all-time leader is Frank Gifford for touchdowns for the Giants. So that's a long time ago. That I did not actually see. This one is fairly recent.
Is it like Brandon Jacobs or something?
It is. There you go.
Brandon Jacobs. Okay.
There you go. Don't test the steel trap. Aaron says, do we expect Flores' defense to start slow? A lot of new guys. What do you think?
Maybe, but I think, I think facing Daniel Jones out of the gate, I think could help the defense get off to a pretty good start.
I think the same thing.
And then we'll kind of see how it plays out after that. I mean, it's a tough matchup with San Francisco week 2, but yeah, I think they'll get off to a decent start. I think they'll be all right.
It's really about the number of veterans that they have in this defense. This is a weird situation with the Vikings in general, because I feel like the way that a lot of people are talking about this team as if they are rebuilding in some ways. And I was just texting with a friend about this, about rebuilding. What should we really call this? And I compared it to having a bunch of projects around the house to be done. And some of them are done and look great, and you're very happy with where the house is getting to. But there's also sawdust and piles of wood and stuff on the ground everywhere because you're not done fixing the projects. But you got to live in the house. You can't just put it on pause and go to a hotel. You've got to live in this house that is the Vikings roster for this year. But the defense has a ton of experience. Dallas Turner and Ivan Pace are really the only young players here. Everybody else, Phillips, Buller, the defensive line, Van Ginkel, these guys have all been around in the league. And what they're trying to do here is build a defense that could be good for several years. And Grenard's got a 4-year contract. I think Van Ginkel and Cashman are on 2-year deals. For their age is probably a good choice. They're going to have to replace some stuff after this year at the cornerback room. You could probably keep Stephon Gilmore if he's really good and he wants to play another season, and you end up liking how it looks. But for the most part, this is a very experienced and veteran defense that I think can jump right out onto the field and be completely fine to start the season. And as you mentioned, yes, they're playing Daniel Jones. It's a great opportunity for everybody to get ramped up. Tim says, hard choice to go away from the pass with Jefferson. If they try to run more, he might be even more successful. I want to make a comparison with this, which is in basketball. Sometimes if you pass it to someone else, and this is Anthony Edwards, I've really, really honed in on this idea with Anthony Edwards. If you come down the floor with the basketball and you pass to someone else, so often the ball gets back to you in just the general way that the ball movement ends up working when you're the star player. Yes. If you try to just dribble and then shoot, it's not a high efficiency shot all that often. And of course, Edwards can make any shot. But I think when he started to really take the next step was when he would come down the floor and he would deliver the ball to Mike Connolly and then go move and get through some picks and force somebody to run with him. It feels the same way with passing to a star wide receiver, where you think that you should just keep throwing to that wide receiver over and over. But sometimes if you let the ball end up back to him by working it to other people and by running the ball, it ends up playing out a lot better than it might if you were just trying to go to that person over and over again. And will KOC actually understand it? I guess we'll figure that out. But I did want to ask you a question just about this Giants game, Manny, which is, I have it written down and it's on my phone. So now I'm opening it. So then I can tell you what that question is. Oh, I know what it was. Your number one factor for this game. What is your number one factor? We get to do win-loss factors, NFL factors.
Factors.
What's your right? Yeah. NFL factors with Manny Hill. That could be a thing we do every week. What's your factors?
Well, I kind of hinted at it already. I think it's the biggest factors for the Vikings defense to really get off to a good start. And this is an opportunity for them against a quarterback who is not good and really has never been good ever, save for playoff games against Ed Donatell's defense. I think this is an opportunity for them to get off to a really good start. And, it's the first week of the season. We typically see that defenses are a little bit ahead of offenses at the start of the year because a lot of number ones don't play in the preseason. And so those first couple of weeks offenses are still trying to find that groove. So it might be a situation where the Vikings defense has a better day than the Vikings offense does. The Vikings still, I think, would win the football game, but this could be like a 20-13 type of game, and I think that would mean a good performance for the defense. And we know, I just called Daniel Jones a bad quarterback 30 seconds ago, and he is a bad quarterback. But we know that, like, one of the things we saw from him in that playoff game 2 years ago was he can run the ball. He's a good enough athlete to kind of hurt you with his legs a little bit as well. And I think that's going to be a key for the Vikings defense, to just not let him keep easy first downs by just, running with his legs and everything, and sustaining drives and things like that. I'd say rattle him early, get to him early. You get to Daniel Jones early and it's a wrap, and you've got him. And at that point, you can kind of cruise to a victory. So I think that's going to be the number one factor for me, is the Vikings defense getting off to a good start. And if they do that, I think they'll easily win this game.
I even want to take it a step further, specifically someone like Andrew Van Ginkel, who has been a big player for them in training camp after he recovered from his foot injury and surgery that he had. But I saw the immediate impact of him when it came to sacks, turnovers, coverage. He just does so much, where he had, I think, something like 147 snaps where he was dropping back and 300 snaps where he was rushing the passer. So you don't know where he's going to be. And one night, Sam Darnold threw an interception to him where he just assumed that he was rushing and then threw the ball directly into him, which is not good for Sam Darnold, and always goes for camp picks because you're like, well, great play. Ooh, bad throw. But in this case, it was just an example of what you can do with Van Ginkel. And I think if he is in Daniel Jones's head, because unlike when he played Ed Donatel, where everyone just lined up in the same spot, never moved, dropped back deep in coverage and said, yes, certainly, please complete all the passes right in front of us. They're not going to do that. Now they're going to have so many moving parts, and the moving parts of the defense would be a major factor for me. Of course, it's the star players, the quarterback, and how everybody performs. But if we're getting more specific than that, looking at a swing player, I think probably Andrew Van Ginkel could be that player. I think it's time, Manny, for you to give your favorite Giants. We got into Brandon Jacobs and Frank Gifford getting a mention. I have to know, this is something that we do almost every week, unless we're talking about the Packers or the Bears. But when it's a team that is not in the division, I need to know, you as an NFL historian, your 5 favorite New York Giants of all time.
All right, so I'm going to count them down from 5 to 1, and I'm going to start with number 5.
Let me get you some music here. Here we go. There we go.
Nice.
There
Love
we go.
it. All right, number 5 favorite New York Giant of all time. This is a name that might surprise you. Dave Meggett.
Oh, yeah. We're talking kick return. Yeah. Great returner, running back, could catch the ball.
Yeah. And I was looking up his, I was thinking about him earlier today, and I was looking up his numbers. He only ran for, I think he had 1,686 career rushing yards total. He played in the league for like 8 or 9 years. But, he actually ended up having more receiving yards as a catcher out of the backfield than he did on the ground. And he was just kind of that multi-tool type of guy. You mentioned as a kick returner, could catch the ball out of the backfield. He was kind of like, he kind of reminded me of a lot of Vikings fans, older Vikings fans will remember, David Palmer.
Yeah.
What David Palmer kind of was for that Vikings offense.
Both number
back in the
22.
90s. Yeah, that's right. Dave Meggett was kind of that David Palmer type of guy. Could do a little bit of everything, just get the ball in his hands, and good things could happen. So love Dave Meggett. Number 4, Amani Toomer, just the consummate pro wide receiver. And you go back, when they won the Super Bowl and beat the Patriots in Super Bowl 42, he was kind of towards the tail end of his career. I think he only played one more season after that. But if you go back to the years before that, there was like a 4 or 5 year stretch there where Amani Toomer was a really productive, really good wide receiver. And again, just a consummate professional, one of the real leaders in that locker room when that team won that Super Bowl. So Amani Toomer is my number 4. Number 3 is he's not my favorite Giant of all time, but I think he's the greatest Giant player of all time, and that's LT. It's Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, Lawrence Taylor, just an absolute menace on the football field. We've heard Bill Belichick, just rave about Lawrence Taylor for so many years, just on how great of a player he was. And he was that guy that just literally struck fear in every offensive player. All 11 offensive players were terrified of Lawrence Taylor coming off the edge and making things happen.
So I heard Belichick the other day saying that the second best player that he felt he ever had was Rodney Harrison. He didn't even have to say number one. We knew exactly that he meant Lawrence Taylor. And one of the cool things about YouTube that I just cannot get enough of, and probably don't produce enough work because of sometimes, is all the old games that you can go watch and all the old NFL Films features. And the more that I've been able to discover about Lawrence Taylor, it's like everything I knew about him, it's even crazier how talented he is. The statistics don't even begin to tell the story with him. You have to put him on any New York Giants list.
Absolutely. All right. Number 2 for me is Eli Manning. And the reason why is Eli Manning, there were so many reasons to rip Eli Manning, threw a lot of interceptions. I think he was roughly around 500 in his career as a starter. The whole thing of, getting drafted by the Chargers and not wanting to play for them and taking that trade to the Giants, all of that stuff makes it kind of easy to rip Eli Manning. But then all of that gets usurped by him beating Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in the Super Bowl twice. Those 2 playoff runs were unbelievable. The guy was much more of a winner than I think he gets credit for. And he was just in those moments when they were going on those 2 Super Bowl runs, he was just magnificent. Won Super Bowl MVP both times, if I'm not mistaken. Just fantastic. And him and his brother, what they do on Monday Night Football now too is a lot of fun and entertaining and fun. So Eli Manning is number 2 on my favorite Giants of all time.
I think when you say get credit for it, depends on who you're talking about. If it's people from New York, that's all they talk about with Eli Manning. What I think he doesn't get a lot of credit for is the league really changed statistically during his career. And by the end, when he wasn't good anymore, his statistics were bad. But early in his career, they used to throw the ball down the field more. They used to run, and they used to run play actions and throw deep down the field. And that was just the NFL at that time. And his average depth of target, his aggressiveness, all those things have to play in. Sometimes I think people look at quarterback rating and go, you look at John Elway's quarterback rating and it's not that great because the guy threw the ball down the field a lot. He was aggressive. They were a little more comfortable with interceptions back then. It was sort of a fact of life of passing the football, where modern football in 2024 is much more protect the ball, don't turn it over, don't take risks. And if Manning was losing in a game, he was going to keep taking shots. He wasn't going to protect his stats because I don't think he cared about that. But I did a little bit of a statistical look at him a few years ago, early in his career, because he was consistently in the top 10 during that time. And then the playoff runs. And that's the one thing I always go back to with Manning when I defend him on the show is he doesn't have to give them back just because you say he's overrated. And if a Vikings quarterback won 2 Super Bowls in the way that he did, you'd have a statue. You'd rename it US Bank Stadium, brought to you by Eli Manning. And you'd have people were putting Nas Reed's name on their bodies. What do you think they'd do if Eli Manning had won the Super Bowl for this team? You can never downplay how great that was. You can't go, well, other than the time he was unbelievable. That's like saying, hey, other than those Mr. October home runs from Reggie Jackson, he was just okay. Yeah, that matters a lot. So he's one of my favorite historic players because I also think the way he handled himself in New York through some tough times early in his career has broken other people. So what do you got? Number 2, number 1?
I'm down to number 1, but one more quick note on Eli Manning too. I think Vikings fans should appreciate Eli Manning a little bit more too, because if it wasn't for him, the Packers might have 2 more Lombardi trophies.
That's true.
Just throwing that out there.
And it was at Lambeau both times, right?
Yeah. So it was the NFC Championship game the first time and then divisional round the second time. And that was that 15-1 Packers team in 2011. So, all right. Number 1 for me is Michael Strahan. I think obviously Hall of Famer, great pass rusher, one of the best defensive ends ever. Went out on a high note, winning that first Super Bowl for the Giants, and then retired after that. That was his last game. And I think really Michael Strahan, what he has become and what his life has become like after football. He's become a television personality, hosting talk shows. He's obviously still an analyst for Fox as well for many years. I just think that the way he has, carried himself and been, a Giants lifer, played his whole career with the Giants. I just think it's really cool and really awesome. And he's just turned himself into a pretty good entertainer on TV as well. So Michael Strahan is my number one.
Very, very likable, entertaining player, and probably didn't deserve that last sack on Brett Favre, but one of the greatest pass rushers of all time. I would toss in, I loved Rodney Hampton back in the day. He was that grounded pound type of guy. Couple wide receivers. If Plaxico Burress hadn't shot himself, really, really good wide receiver. Plaxico Burress was great for those teams. Victor Cruz was a lot of fun. Might depend on what kind of guy you are, whether you liked Jeremy Shockey or not, but he was a heck of a football player. Maybe not always the guy that you exactly wanted to be around. They also had great offensive lines when they won those Super Bowls. And those guys, I think, were a main part of why Eli Manning was able to push the ball down the field as much as he did. And Tiki Barber, another guy, after he said that Eli Manning couldn't win and wasn't a great leader, and then he won 2 Super Bowls, he looked so bad and so stupid after saying that. But he was a great player. He was one of those, because I've always had a thing, because I grew up with watching Thurman Thomas. I've always had a thing for the all-around back. Always been big with the all-around back, and that was Tiki Barber. And if you're looking for an Aaron Jones comp for someone who went into their late 20s and 30s, that's a good one. So before you go, Manny,
mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you think? Gonna win? Gonna lose?
Yeah, I think they're win. I think, I just don't. I don't think the Giants are going to be very good. I've kind of soured on Brian Daboll as a head coach. I think things went so bad last year. After this guy was the coach of the year. His first year as head coach, and went in and won a playoff game here. But last year was just such a disaster, and Daniel Jones is just not good. And I think the Vikings take care of business. It may not be a blowout, like I kind of point out, maybe like a 20-13, 20-10 type of game. But I think the Vikings are going to come away with a win. If they don't, might be a little bit worried. Considering the following games after that.
That was the other thing I wrote down as far as things for us to talk about is what if they don't pull this out? But I think we all know the answer to that is it gets bleak very fast. And this is my one thing for the season. So it's always my approach is, as is evidenced, I cover this team no matter what happens. I've covered 1-5 stretches. I've covered the NFC Championship. I'll be here tomorrow no matter what happens. When Monday morning Murph will happen after the game, I don't shut Purple Insider down if it's not a good season. But I want it to be a season. I think that's what everybody is nervous about with the start of this thing, is just let it be a season. Let it be something entertaining. Let it be something fun. Let players have big seasons and not be an injury festival and not be a disappointment and not be talking about the draft when we get to, I don't know, November, and let it be playoff scenarios and in the hunt. And if they win this game and this team loses the game, it could actually be fun this year if that's the case. It's been so miserable to do that in years past. I snarked about it endlessly. Oh, you in the hunt again? Congratulations. But this year, if they get there with Darnold, it could be fun. It could be a reinvigoration or an invigoration, I guess, of his career. But if it goes sideways on Sunday and they lose to the Giants, and then we're coming back talking about, well, here's Kyle Shanahan and all the superstars. You couldn't beat Daniel Jones. So, but once upon a time, Chris Winkie won his first game against the Vikings and then never won again. So
I was at that game. Did I ever tell you I was?
No, you didn't tell me that.
So quick story before I go. I was at that game. We were on the field, one of those like field in the corner of the end zone seats. And because you remember Steve Smith, rookie Steve Smith, took the opening kickoff of the season back for a touchdown. And you, Coller, you could hear, mind you, this is the Vikings, 2001. The Vikings are coming off a trip to the NFC Championship game, a game that didn't go very well. It was 41 donut, but there was a lot of hype with this team, still going into the season, because this was thought that, okay, this team can still compete. Steve Smith brought that opening kickoff back for a touchdown. You could hear a pin drop in the Metrodome after that. And it was a telling sign of how that season was going to go.
What a it's such a crazy result that I still remember it to this day. I mean, I don't know that there's any other game that was a surprising week 1 result that would have been so shocking. It would stick in my mind.
George Seifert was the head coach of the Panthers. Yeah. George Seifert, 2-time Super Bowl winning coach with the 49ers. George Seifert went 1-15.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah. Well, good times, Manny. We will have a football game to break down next Monday night when you and I talk again. Every Monday and Thursday night, I got the TV over here. We'll be watching the games, having our Vikings conversation, and we will see what is next with this football team. So good stuff, Manny. And I will talk to you on Monday.
Football.
We'll see you later, man. Thanks for doing this.
Got it.
All right. Well, hold on. Let me put my head. Whoop. All right. Who's got questions? Anybody want to talk football? I will chat for maybe another half hour, but I know what you guys have been waiting for, which is the ad reads. I know that's what nobody reminded me again in the chat, really just failing the show. Thanks everyone. But I remembered to remind you that US Cellular, notice the way that we use our phones has gotten ironic. We put our phones down for dinner, but the menu's on a QR code. That is ironic. We hit like on social media posts we don't actually like. Also ironic, which is why US Cellular created Us Mode to help us reconnect with each other and use our phones less ironically. A phone company wanting people to use their phones less. That's ironic. Let's find us again with Us Mode from US Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built-for-us to get started. And folks, you're going to want to pay attention here. There is a very important deal that Underdog Fantasy is running. Okay? Saturday from midnight Eastern until the game start, they are going to have 4 discounts on players from your favorite teams in college football. Midnight to game time on Saturday, Underdog is discounting the dogs. So they're going to have a promo there. If you go to where the college football is on the Pick'em at Underdog Fantasy, you'll see it. It'll say discounts. Click it. Lots of good deals there. So you want to go to that on Saturday, discount the dogs, and use the promo code PURPLE to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. So that's what you're going to want to do on Saturday. I've been looking through the college football for this week, and there are some very exciting matchups. Jeremiah Searles and I talked earlier about a dog-related team in the Wolfpack, but you know who's got my attention? And I'm not looking at quarterbacks, okay? J.J. McCarthy's the guy, but as far as college football goes, Quinn Ewers is a really entertaining quarterback, and he looked like he's made some progress for this year, and his higher or lower number is 238.5 yards passing against Michigan. This is the matchup of the week. You're going to want to get in on this one. I'm going with Quinn Ewers needs to pass for more than 238.5 yards. Going with the higher on this one for Quinn Ewers. It will be quite a matchup there. Also, with Donovan Edwards, 0.5, a rushing or receiving touchdown. I'm going to go higher on that as well. That one I think is going to be an extremely fun game, but make sure you go check out all those dog discounts at Underdog Fantasy and use that promo code PURPLE because that helps the show. Okay. Zoomer Kev says 50 bold predictions. I have not put out the article yet. I started making it, but then stuff happens like my job. Bold prediction. I'll try to get it by Sunday. There's only going to be 2 games before Sunday, but if you guys have bold predictions, I would love to hear them and we could talk about some of them, and maybe I will potentially steal some for this year. But my bold predictions, I just haven't gotten around to the list. I usually make it every year. Aaron says pie chart time, playoffs win, playoff lose first round, sub 6 win season. Oh, so there's nothing in the middle. You're saying pie chart with not the outcomes that everybody thinks the Vikings are going to have. I like it. This is a good idea, Aaron. Playoffs with a win, lose in the first round, or a sub 6 win season. I'm going to go, how about if I can only use these outcomes? So you went into the future and said one of these 3 outcomes happen, not 8 and 9 miss the playoffs. And I got to guess which one is the most likely. Unfortunately, sub 6 win season would seem to be the most likely based on what Vegas thinks and based on the fact that if Sam Darnold were to get hurt, they would be in a lot of trouble with their backup quarterback situation. And just with the schedule, you could start off really poorly, even if Darnold plays okay. That is the most likely scenario here, but I'm not going to go wild with sub 6 win because I've picked them to win 9 games. So I can't say, oh yeah, well, actually this is the most likely of the 3 by far. Logically, it is the most likely of the 3 though. So I will go, how about 40% sub 6 win season? And no, I've got to go even higher than that. I'll go 50 sub 6 win season, 40 playoffs with a loss in the first round, and 10 playoffs with a win in the first round. If those are the only 3 outcomes that we could potentially have here this year, just because anything kind of goes sideways for this team, where it looks right now with Aaron Jones, with the way Darnold practiced, with Jefferson, with Addison, should be okay. It should be competitive. I think that's my feeling coming out of camp. I've told you this guy before, guys, that I've had a feeling about teams before coming out of camp that I think has been fairly accurate to where they've been. And you can never predict what's going to happen. But coming out of camp in 17, looking around the roster, this thing is pretty good. And then the most surprising was 2022, but the vibes were so good in 2022 because Zimmer was gone. Everyone was connecting with KOC right away. He was the good cop. The bad cop was gone. And I would have never predicted all those 1-score wins. But even if we chopped down a few of the 1-score wins that were random, they still would have been a playoff team. And I think that team was worthy of that. The vibes coming out of this, despite the bad injuries of Mekhi Blackmon and JJ McCarthy, feel like pretty good based on what everyone's seen from Darnold and based on how good the defenses looked. That makes me think that losing in the first round of the playoffs is almost equal to having a really bad season, but going anywhere deep into the playoffs, that would be pretty difficult. See, this is proof that you guys watch/listen every night. Wade, if Zimmer can be explained by Citizen Kane or There Will Be Blood, what movies explain KOC? Those things, that has to come to me organically. It's usually something that I've run across or read not too long ago or stuck with me for some reason. I don't know. With Kevin O'Connell, it would have to be a movie with a character, and maybe there's something that fits this, who tries as hard as he can to always stay on the optimistic side, no matter what comes his way. No matter if it's a quarterback injury or another quarterback injury or a losing streak, that last year, even when they had a losing streak and they started off, was it 0-3? He was saying to us and saying to the team, guys, when I was with the Rams and we won the Super Bowl in the middle of the season, we lost 3 games and we still won the Super Bowl 3 games in a row. And he's always looking for angles to try to spin things in a direction of, we can do it, we can make it, it's going to go our way if we just do the right things. And in football, you can't really will it to happen, and it really beats you down. But the fact that he is still that, and I wrote an article about this last year and asked a bunch of people about him just being this energy, constant positive energy guy, and always believing that the next play is the one that's going to work, and the type of value to that. I mean, at times I've wondered, does he need to be even more critical? Does he even need to be a little more on the downside when it comes to getting in players' faces? And do you praise everybody to the point where they don't know what they need to do better because you're telling them that they're great all the time? I don't know how that works in that dynamic behind the scenes. If you can communicate the messages. Okay. Jonathan Harrison says that I'm describing Ted Lasso. Is that right? I have not seen Ted Lasso because I just don't get a lot of chances to watch much television. I catch House Hunters from time to time, and I've seen The Sopranos and The Wire and Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and that's about it. Okay. Chris. Oh, this is good. This is good, Zoomer Kev. Chris Traeger on Parks and Rec. I've seen Parks and Rec. That's right. That's really good. That's really good. If you guys watch Parks and Rec, Chris Traeger on Parks and Rec, always energetic, always super positive. And even at times where things go very bad for him, he's always trying to be the one who pushes people back to that. It's going to go our way. We're going to work this out. That's pretty good. And I think as a team, and it's important that they have these veteran players, because as long as you have veteran players, you don't need someone to push veteran players. You don't need Jonathan Grenard, who just got this huge contract and has worked his butt off to get 12 sacks last season. You don't need that guy to be pushed by a coach. And that was, I think, something that veteran players got very frustrated by with Mike Zimmer. We don't need you to tell us what's wrong all the time. I'm Adam Thielen or something, right? I've been in the league forever. I know what I did right and wrong. And I think Kevin O'Connell needs that in the locker room. And he needs those players to also push the younger players as well and help them understand how they're supposed to carry themselves and play, because they're not going to have a head coach that is just going to drive into the ground the things that they can't do well, which it can be frustrating for players. But also I think there is such a thing as, if you are super critical, you can hold your players to a pretty high standard and push them to get better and better. It's a delicate mix, but that constant positive energy from O'Connell resonates really well with guys who've been in the league, because they feel like he respects that we're veteran players and we know what we're doing. So he doesn't have to tell us every single time a mistake was made. He knows that if it's Justin Jefferson, he knows that Justin Jefferson is going to correct that the next time and work. And it seems like he has trust in his assistant coaches, especially Keenan McCardle, Josh McCown. There's a lot of things that Kevin O'Connell does from the leadership perspective that I think really do resonate well with just people in general. Let's see. Wade says, more serious question. What are some key week 1 personnel matchups you need to win? Let me call up my Giants depth chart here. So I've got it in front of me. Giants depth chart. Football. Well, I mean, we could go all the way through the field for key matchups. And I've got a podcast tomorrow night with Andrew Kramer that we recorded today out at TCO about really the hardcore matchups. But since you asked, I mean, number 1 is Dexter Lawrence against the interior line. But I'll throw out there, we've talked about that a lot, but I'll throw out there, how about every other receiver that is not Malik Neighbors against the Vikings coverage and secondary? Because they have some good ones. They have Jalen Hyatt, who I think is a very good player and has a chance to be a serious deep threat for this team. Wan'Dale Robinson is kind of interesting to me. He's never really broken out. I'm looking at his stats now, but he had 60 catches last year. He had 500 plus yards. That's pretty good for him. So they've had some guys. Darius Slayton has had good years before. They have enough good young wide receivers around Malik Neighbors to be dangerous for Daniel Jones. And this is why I don't want to quite go there as far as laughing at Daniel Jones. Oh, well, he's really bad. I think he's not good, but also don't we talk about, hey, Sam Darnold could be pretty good because he's got these receivers. They're probably saying the same thing over there in the New York Giants, like Daniel Jones could have his best year because he's had no wide receivers around him at all. So not just Malik Neighbors, but everybody else. Last year, if a team had good receivers, it was just good night for the Minnesota Vikings because they couldn't cover. Now they've got veteran corners. Can they cover a little bit more? And I think that they should be able to, but they're young and the Vikings corners are not young. Shaq Griffin and Stephon Gilmore. All right. If anybody has any more questions, I will answer. If not, then this will be the last live show before a football game, unless something happens. I don't ever want to jinx it because stuff tends to happen to the Minnesota Vikings, but we're ready to go. Make sure you go over to purpleinsider.com and check out for sure the writing that I've done this week. I'm working on something about personnel groupings and how I expect to see more big, meaty dudes on the field this year for the Vikings. Got some really cool data from Sumer Sports in this article that I'm working on. There's going to be a Friday mailbag. So I'm just excited to get going, excited to go to East Rutherford, and I will be there with Dane Mizutani post-game in the press box at the Giants Stadium, and then in a hotel at the Newark Airport on Monday morning for Monday Morning Murph, and then back here for the evening show with Manny. Yeah, it's going to be exciting couple days. So thank you all for such a great run up to this with all the awesome live chats, all the questions, all the fun that we've had, and I cannot wait to go forward. And just a reminder of the schedule, we'll have the game day pod, the Monday Morning Murph, the Manny in the evening, and then Jeremiah Searles with Tuesday Morning Left Guard, which is often played on YouTube in the evening because it's ironic, just like US Cellular. And then Wednesday is the big chat. That's when I get a lot of stuff from TCO Performance Center, come home, answer all your questions. So that's what it's going to be pretty much every week going forward, unless it's a weird week or bye week or something. So thanks everybody so much for watching and listening, and we will talk to you all very soon. Come on, say it. Football.